today we have Helena guiding us with another homily on Proverbs chapter 7.
Okay, so it works now? Okay, quick. So we had a recap of Proverbs. So we've been doing, for the past 2 weeks, there has been a little topic that's always been coming around from Solomon. It's on adultery. But this week I'm going to be talking about the temptations of darkness, which will lead to adultery as well. So I'm going to be focusing on the story of the crafty harlot. So this harlot is a seducer who lurks around the corners and tries to bring men to her house. So this story is something that Solomon witnessed. So he would look out his window and he saw it with his own eyes. So this story goes as this. So the woman is always loud and rebellious and is always trying to look for a man at night. It's never in the day. It's always at night. So that shows that it's in darkness and it's something evil. So Solomon advises us that this does not happen during the day, and it happens at night. I already said that, sorry. So we see that she's describing to the man that her bed is made for him, that her husband's not there, and so she's basically seducing the guy, and that's a temptation for him, obviously. So this man fell for her seduction and went straight in with her to commit that sin. So that right there is a person who left his morals and submitted to the temptations given to him. So Solomon is basically trying to tell us, if we hang around with the wrong crowd, we could end up with all the temptations that we try to stay away from, that could end up doing things or saying things that could lead us to sins. So there is an old saying that says, hang out with the dogs and pretty soon you will get fleas. This saying means that basically if you hang around bad company, you will end up with a lot of problems. So I have a story that was said on Friday youth reading. Abuna Paula has mentioned it. This was the story of Saint Abraam. So at the time he was a bishop and he was going through visitations and everything, and so he met this woman who everyone knows she's got a bad reputation and she's an adulteress and everything. So she goes to him, she goes, can you come to my house, please? I need you to bless it in the name of the Lord. And he goes, I'm sorry, I've got to go back to the monastery and I need to go back and pray and everything. She goes, please, in the name of the Lord, come bless my house. So he goes, okay, because she said in the name of the Lord. Obviously, he doesn't know what reputation she has, nothing. He just met the woman. So basically, he went in, and the next day, all the congregation spread the rumors and everything that he basically went into a house of an adulteress. So, and then he goes to them, he goes, I blessed this house, and because she asked me in the name of the Lord, I blessed it for her, and I watered it for her. So this could be something towards us as when we sin and when we are doing all these temptations, who are we to judge this adulterous woman when we ourselves are sinning and doing all that stuff? And everyone is just spreading rumors that, hey, look, she's an adulteress, you can't go to her. But through the power of the Lord, he went and still blessed her house, even if he didn't know what had happened. So this story tells me that even when there are times where I would be tempted to do anything or fall into sin, I could immediately pick myself back up through the will of God and go to Abuna and bless me and confess. It is exactly like what the harlot did. She asked for a blessing in the name of the Lord through the Saint Abraam, which was the bishop at the time. And at the end of the day, Solomon is also trying to tell us that to keep an eye out for all the temptations and any darkness that could lead to any sin that we are going through. So as I said, we go to Abuna, we confess, we repent, and also make him bless us like he would bless, like how the bishop obviously blessed the woman. We know that the harlot, she was obviously doing wrong, she was always in darkness and everything, and we know that for us to get to heaven, we want the light, but we know that that harlot was always in darkness, and she would always ask for men during the nighttime. So that woman, obviously, we know that she's going to go down the wrong path and she's going to go to hell. So basically Solomon's trying to tell us that if we are going towards her path, we're not going to be going in the right path towards the light of heaven, but instead we're going to be going down to hell with her. So for us to shine the light, we would always have to stay away from the temptation and the darkness of sins and lead more towards the light of God, basically. Does anyone have any questions? I made it very short and very simple, which was really good. Any questions? No? All right, thank you guys.
All right, guys, once again, thanks for coming to another Monday night Bible study. Today we are going to continue through our journey through Exodus, and today we are blessed with our very bubbly Beck Kozman, so please make her feel welcome.
Hey guys, how y'all doing? Okay. I'm gonna ask you guys to participate in this Bible study, so don't get awkward, yeah? Okay, so Exodus chapter 4. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So I'll be jumping back and forth between chapter 3 and chapter 4, because a lot of what happened in chapter 3 has a lot to do with what happens in chapter 4, just for context. So you guys, I assume, read chapter 4 last week? 3. I don't even know what I'm doing. Chapter 3, okay, mad. So yeah, last week, the burning bush, God speaks to Moses through the burning bush, which I feel like we really don't shed a lot of light on, the fact that there was this bush and God was speaking through it, but regardless. So I'm going to try and, because it's quite a lengthy chapter, it's 31 verses, I'm going to try and do it in chunks as much as I can, because there's a lot to cover in this chapter. So we'll take it slow, but I'll try and go fast at the same time. We'll see how it goes. There you go. All right, so I'll start reading. Does that work? I'll just read? Okay, cool. I'm just checking if it's the same translation. Yeah, I'll just read off the screen. Okay. So I'll just read verse 1. Then Moses answered and said, "But suppose they will not believe me or listen to my voice. Suppose they say, 'The Lord has not appeared to you.'" So, hold on a second. Yeah. I'm going to keep reading another verse, actually. So the Lord said to him, "What is that in his hand?" And he said, "A rod." So when we look at verse 1, we're seeing that Moses is kind of already questioning God's choice for him. So in terms of the context here is, when we look back at chapter 3, God is asking Moses to go where? Trivia. For you guys. to Pharaoh. Yeah, to Egypt. Yeah. So God asked Moses in chapter 3, he's like, "I'm going to send you to Pharaoh and you're going to go and you're going to free my people." Yeah. So Moses, now in verse 1, he's like, "But who am I? Who am I to go to Pharaoh?" And already Moses is questioning God's choice for him. I don't think it's wrong that Moses already initially asks this, because it is a very big task that he's being asked of by God. And it was a logical question. When we look back at chapter 3, in verse 11, he says, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" Moses. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? But God answered this in literally the next verse in chapter 3, when he says, "I will certainly be with you." And so that's why I keep jumping back to chapter 3, because it bounces back, I promise. And it just shows as well, Moses questioning God's choice, choosing Moses, shows a little bit of his unbelief as well, which is a bit of a theme across chapter 4 as well. And also in chapter 3, sorry, I'm just going back to it a lot, because again, it relates. God reassured Moses and he told them, they will heed your voice, they will listen to you. And Moses kind of protested it here, and he said, "But suppose they will not believe me or listen to my voice." What if they don't listen to me? What if they're not going to pay attention to me? And this just shows a little bit of a lack of Moses' confidence and a little bit of lack of faith in God as well, which we will dive into right now. And he says, but. So I'll read verses 2 to 5. So the Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" He said, "A rod." And he said, "Cast it on the ground." So he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses fled from it. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Reach out your hand and take it by the tail." And he reached out his hand and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. So the question, when we go back to verse 3, what is that in your hand? So this reflects a very precious principle, is that God uses people. Like what's in your hand, God will use. What's in your talents, God will use. And God used literally what Moses had in his hand. He had a rod, just like a stick. And I'll get into a bit more about this rod as well. But he just had a rod, and what did God do? He turned it into a serpent. I don't know, it baffles me, okay? I don't know, I'm a very simple-minded person. This stuff baffles me. But with the rod as well, like this is that same rod that Moses probably used as when he was tending to sheep. Like a very simple task, like a very simple job that he had was tending to sheep, and God used that, whatever was in his hand. And all those years of him tending sheep, they were not in vain, and they were not useless years either. So God used all those years of his hard work of tending to sheep, eventually for God's glory. So there's a little nugget of wisdom in that one. And eventually this is the rod that would later on in this chapter be called the rod of God. So something very simple used for God's glory. And not only did he turn it into a serpent, he told him to pick up the serpent by the tail. So I didn't know this, but apparently the tail, like when you grab a snake from its tail, apparently that's like the most dangerous place to grab a snake by, is the tail. I don't know if Moses knew that. I don't know if any of you knew that, but apparently it's the most dangerous place to pick up a snake. And so he did it. So he reached out his hand and he took it by the tail. So not only did we just see Moses' lack of confidence and lack of faith just 2 verses earlier, but he just trusted God in this moment to pick up a snake by its tail. And so we can see his eventual trust and his eventual faith in what God has planned for Moses as well. So in this little incident, of just, him God turning the rod into a serpent and him holding it, we see that Moses is now learning to do what God tells him to do, even if it's uncomfortable. Even if it's, I don't think it's such a good idea. He's slowly learning that. Is that, yeah? Mad. I'll keep reading. I'll do verses 6 to 9. Furthermore, the Lord said to him, "Now put your hand in your bosom." And he put his hand in his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. And he said, "Put your hand in your bosom again." So he put his hand in his bosom again, and drew it out of his bosom, and behold, it was restored like his other flesh. Then it will be, if they do not believe you, nor heed the message of the first sign, that they may believe the message of the latter sign. And it shall be, if they do not believe even these 2 signs, or listen to your voice, that you shall take water from the river and pour it on the dry land. The water which you take from the river will become blood on the dry land. So 3 instances happened just in these couple of verses. So kind of like 3 miracles, in a way, will kind of be happening, I guess. So firstly, he put his hand in his bosom. I'll try and whenever I hear the word bosom, I don't really know what it means, so I just assume it's something like this, I would assume. All right, that's just for demonstration purposes. I'm just putting it in my jacket pocket, put my hand in, leprous. Modern day, I guess, scholars and stuff would liken leprosy to that of cancer. That's how severe it was, right? But then he popped it back in, took it back out, restored like new, like nothing ever happened to it. So both of these signs, the first sign of the leprous hand, and if we go back to verse 6, 7, I was right, my bad. It was that, my bad. I'm so tired. it was restored. Essentially, his hand was restored. So the concept of that act of his hand being restored has to do with transformation, okay? So something good and useful, so something like Moses' rod, something like Moses' hand, was made into something that was evil, something that was bad. So if we look back at the rod, for example, it was turned into a serpent. If we look at Moses' hand, it was turned into, or it had leprosy. But God restored both of those things. He restored the staff back to its normalcy, the rod back to its normalcy, and restored the hand, so back into transformation. And there's a real message in these signs as well. And the first one is saying, Moses, if you obey me, your enemies will be made powerless. Like a serpent, you can just kind of crush it under your feet. And the second one is, if you obey me, whatever is around you will be pure, just like how I restored your hand to be pure like it was again, through transformation as well. But I feel like even in those moments, sometimes Moses probably was still doubting. Like, even if he had signs happening. I know I would. All of this is just to get Moses to Egypt, by the way. Like, just to get him to Egypt, to go talk to Pharaoh. And God is doing all these signs to prove to him, like, it's all right, I've got you. But he's still trying to push Moses to go. And then even in verse 9, the water that he takes from the river, he'll take it, put it on dry land, and it'll be like blood. That's another miracle. So if the people don't believe Moses' hand being transformed, if they don't believe his rod being turned into a serpent, and if they don't listen to him, he can go to the water, take some water, put it on dry land, and it'll be blood. And hopefully the people will listen to you. So God is giving him all these things to kind of encourage him and to push him. So I will continue on because there's so much to cover. We'll read verse 10, please. Then Moses said to the Lord, "O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." So apparently Moses, like the great Moses, had a speech impediment. Apparently. It might have been like a stutter or something, I'm not too sure. Or he just had like stage fright, like one of the two. But he was not confident in himself to speak. And that's what he was saying. He was saying to God, like, you've got the wrong guy. Like, I'm slow of speech and slow of tongue. Like, there's no way I can articulate what you want me to say to Pharaoh and to the people. Like, there's no way, you've got the wrong guy. But this excuse that Moses is giving, like that he's slow of speech, it's not justified. Because 40 years ago, he was not slow of speech and slow of tongue. When we read in the book of Acts, in chapter 7, it says, Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in words and deeds. So like he knew what he was talking about half the time. So he's trying now to give excuses to God. And how many times do we give excuses to God for not wanting to do something? So his self-confidence, like down in the gutters, is gone, but he needed God's confidence instead. And that's what we're going to dive into, hopefully now. So verses 11 and 12. So the Lord said to him, "Who has made man's mouth? Or who makes the mute, the deaf, the seeing, or the blind? Have not I the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall say." The fact that Moses believed that he was not eloquent in his speech is completely beside the point. The God who created the most eloquent of mouths, most eloquent of like scholars and speakers, was on his side. He created them, right? He gave them these gifts. And when it says like he makes the mute, the deaf, the blind, some think like in verse 11, like something that's kind of cruel. Like why would God make someone mute, deaf, blind, and all those things? So the point is that it's not to analyze. Like some people dive into that verse and like try and analyze the origin of evil with it because it's like, why would God do that? Like a haram, like it's so bad. But the point is, it's to show that God is so mighty that he can call on the mute, he can call on the deaf, he can call on the blind to do his work. And whatever Moses didn't like about himself at the time, it didn't matter because God was going to use him anyway, regardless of what he said. And even if Moses was a poor speaker, even if he did have issues speaking or a speech impediment or something, like was that news to God? Like as if God didn't already know that. And as if he didn't already know that Moses didn't have the confidence. So did God make a mistake here in choosing Moses? I don't think so. Like he definitely knew what he was doing. And he even says, God says, I will be with your mouth and will teach you what to say. So by extension of this as well, God is sufficient for us, no matter what our, I guess, inadequacies may be. No matter what it is you may think is your weakness, God's going to use that weakness, he's going to take it, and he's going to do something great with it. So like no matter what it is, he'll take it. Whether you're blind, mute, deaf, or whatever, he'll take it and do something great with it, regardless. Which I think is kind of nice. Cool. Any questions so far? Like, is it all making sense? Hectic. I got a bunch of nods. Mad. All right. Verses 13 to 17. But he said, O my Lord, please send by the hand of whoever else you may send. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. And he said, Is not Aaron the Levite your brother? I know that he can speak well. And look, he is also coming out to meet you. When he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. Now you shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth. And I will be with your mouth and with his mouth. And I will teach you what you shall do. So he shall be your spokesman to the people. And he himself shall be as a mouth for you. And you shall be to him as God. And you shall take his rod in your hand, or you shall take this rod in your hand, with which you shall do the signs. So now we've got the character of Aaron coming in. Aaron turned out to be a source of mushkela for Moses, like so many problems for Moses. If you guys don't know, he instigated the worship of a golden cow, and like he built an altar for himself. It was madness and chaos. And I say this every time I do like a Bible study on the Old Testament. Like you can make a Netflix series of the stories in the Old Testament. Like it's insane. But in the beginning, like in this section, like Moses is now telling God, like, please send someone else, like anyone but me. So like God just gave him like some tools. He gave him his rod. He gave him like the miracle of his hand. He told him, I will be with you. And Moses is still giving excuses. He's like, I just really don't want to go. So he's giving him another excuse, like, please send someone else. But now we see, like, you know, it says that God was angry in this moment. God was not angry, you know, in chapter 3. Again, I'm going to go back to chapter 3. You know, Moses asked him, you know, who am I to go? God was not angry at that moment. He wasn't angry when Moses says, who should I say sent me? To question him. And he wasn't angry when Moses didn't believe his word as well. And he wasn't even angry with any false claims about Moses himself. But God was angry when Moses was just plain unwilling in this moment. That's when God got mad. He was like, you just don't want to do it. Like, you just don't want to do the work. That's what made God angry, which is kind of scary a little bit. And then we bring in again the character of Aaron. Aaron was like a smooth talker. He was very good with his words, but he was very bad with his content. Like, he wasn't very good with what he was talking about. Like, the best way I can probably put it into an analogy is like, think of him as like a news reporter. He's not reading his own work, he's just reading whatever's on the screen, right? And that's what Moses is to him in this moment. God will speak to Moses, will give him the words to give to Aaron to speak to the people, or to Pharaoh. Okay, so that's kind of what's happening in this moment. Does that make sense? It took me a while to get that. I was like, where did Aaron come from? But it got there in the end eventually. Verse 18. So Moses went and returned to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, please let me go and return to my brethren who are in Egypt, and see whether they are still alive. And Jethro said to Moses, go in peace. This verse doesn't have to be in this chapter. It's very like what's it got to do with anything? But it just also shows that Moses had no idea what he was getting himself into. But also, it just shows a very good example of Moses still respecting his father-in-law, regardless of his own status as well. And Jethro was with Moses the whole time, like his whole career of working with God. Jethro was always there. So he's a very good example of making sure that it was clear and okay for him to go to Egypt, essentially. So that's another sign of obedience from Moses as well. Cool. Verses 19 to 23. Now the Lord said to Moses in Midian, "Go, return to Egypt, for all the men who sought your life are dead." Then Moses took his wife and his sons and set them on a donkey, and he returned to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the rod of God in his hand. Again, the rod of God, that's what it's called now. And the Lord said to Moses, "When you go back to Egypt, see that you do all those wonders before Pharaoh, which I have put in your hand." So the rod, his hand, the water turning into blood thing, all those things. "But I will harden his heart, so that he will not let the people go. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, 'Thus says the Lord, Israel is my son, my firstborn. So I say to you, let my son go, that he may serve me. But if you refuse to let him go, indeed I will kill your son, your firstborn.'" Like, all of a sudden now Moses is going to have confidence and threaten Pharaoh by killing his son. Like, we just thought he had no confidence and no faith, and now he's going to do this. Like, it's insane. So God knew that Moses, he was going to be safe in Egypt, and he eased his mind from his, his anxieties and from his worries. But, again, through the rod, through his hands, and I'm going to keep emphasizing this as well, because it's just showing that God is giving him all these tools to go to Egypt and to talk to Pharaoh, to let his people go. So he's giving him all these things, and he's like, "I'm going to be with you, don't worry," just to ease Moses' anxiety. And then on top of this, like plot twist, God is going to harden Pharaoh's heart and make him hard to get. Like, it's not going to be an easy job. Like, this is what I mean. It can be such a funny series. Anyway, that's just my opinion. So the question always comes up. Oh, you have a question? Oh, no. Okay. Yeah, I'm literally going to get to that point. Thank you, sir. Fantastic. Perfect segue. So there, I was literally about to say, this question always comes up. Why does God harden people's hearts? But who really hardened Pharaoh's heart is the question. Was it Pharaoh or was it God? So we might say that it was both God and Pharaoh that hardened his heart. But whenever God hardened Pharaoh's heart, he never did it against Pharaoh's will, right? So it's not like Pharaoh said, it's like, "Oh, I'm going to do whatever's good and right, and I'm going to bless the people of Israel," which he was using as slaves, just like all of a sudden click yani. And then, God was like, "Oh, no, I'm going to harden your heart against them." Like, it's not how it goes. So when God hardened his heart, he actually allowed Pharaoh's heart to be hardened. And Pharaoh was going to do it regardless. So God gave Pharaoh over to his own sin, out of his own will. Like, he was going to do it anyway. So God allowed it to kind of happen. Does that make sense? Yeah. Oh, thank God, okay. Okay. I always have to circle around it. So, yeah. So, and we see that a lot in the Old Testament as well, with a lot of the kings as well, the protagonists, God hardened his heart, or God softened his heart. It's out of their own will that God did it as well. And as a whole picture, God also regarded Israel, just kind of segueing into verses 22 and 23. God regarded Israel as his firstborn, and God knew that there's going to be an exchange of his firstborn, being Israel, and Egypt's firstborn as well, which is also a bit prophetic in a way, because we have the sacrifice of Christ in the New Testament being the firstborn son of God, and also Abraham sacrificing his own son. And there's so many themes with this. That's why I'm trying to go through it, because it's a lot. Yeah, but is that all making sense? Because we're almost finished. Yeah, it's great. I know, I can shut up. All right, verses 24 to 26. This part as well, again, doesn't necessarily have to be in this chapter. Has nothing to do with Moses journeying to Pharaoh. But it's in there for a reason. Just like how when Moses went to Jethro, his father-in-law, it has a purpose, just like this section has a purpose as well. So verses 24 to 26. And it came to pass on the way at the encampment that the Lord met him and sought to kill him. Then, I can never pronounce his name, Zipporah, I'm just going to say that. Then Zipporah took a sharp stone and cut off the foreskin of her son and cast it at Moses' feet and said, "Surely you are a husband of blood to me." So he let him go. Then she said, "You are a husband of blood because of the circumcision." Like it's random. Like they just chucked the circumcision event and it's dramatic as well. Like an angel came and everything. And actually the angel came and sought to kill him as well, in addition. It's a very mysterious event. But it seems that in this kind of moment, God is confronting Moses. And in the strongest way possible. Because Moses still hadn't circumcised his son. Which was a very big thing for the Jews, I guess at the time and now as well. It was a very big thing, and he still hasn't done it. So God demands that this is set right before Moses gets to Egypt and to fulfill his call. And then when we look at Moses' wife, like her response is like so dramatic. She's like, "You are a husband of blood." Like it's, people would say that she's very bitter in this interaction. But it could be perhaps, she's kind of like this maybe because she's kind of recognizing that this is her husband's call. Like it's all slowly happening. And how important it is for her whole family to walk in the way of God. So to make sure that their sons were circumcised according to the law and according to God's law as well. So again, didn't necessarily have to be here, but it's there for a purpose. If Moses is going to do his God's will for him and his calling and go to Egypt, he has to make sure everything's set in place before he goes, including the circumcision of his own son as well. Yeah? It all ties together eventually. And now this is the final part. We're pretty much done. So verses 27 to 31. And the Lord said to Aaron, "Go into the wilderness to meet Moses." So he went and met him on the mountain of God and kissed him. So Moses told Aaron all of the words of the Lord who had sent him, and all of the signs which he had commanded him. Then Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of the children of Israel. And Aaron spoke all the words which the Lord had spoken to Moses. Then he did the signs in the sight of the people. So the people believed, and when they heard that the Lord had visited the children of Israel, and that he had looked on their affliction, then they bowed their heads and worshipped. So it's kind of like a happy ending. So after all what just happened, Moses and Aaron finally meet up, they link up. Moses tells Aaron, "This is what God told me. I need you to go and say it now." And Moses had all of the signs ready to go. He had, his little hand trick, he had his staff, his rod, and, he still didn't have his speech though. That's the kicker. After all this, Moses still wasn't even the one to talk. It was Aaron that did the talking. So this is something that's really, really nice, is that God uses each and every one of us for each other, which is really kind of sweet. So, and also it's funnily enough that it's Aaron as well, because I'm pretty sure at one point, like a couple of chapters ago in Genesis or something, Aaron was trying to kill him, but we've moved past that. So God told Moses that he would bring Aaron to him, and he did. He kept his promise. God kept his promise that I'm not going to humiliate you, I'm going to give you Aaron, and he did. So God fulfilled his promise to Moses. And it just so happened, as God said as well, and just as God promised, and again, I'm going to go back to chapter 3, they will heed your voice. God said that to Moses, they're going to listen to you, so don't worry. It wasn't exactly Moses' voice, but it was God speaking through Moses. Aaron didn't have that access to God. He didn't have that kind of link up with God. Moses did. Okay, so it was technically Moses' voice. And the people of Israel, they listened. So yay. God knew what was going to happen. He's just trying to build Moses' confidence, build his faith, and build his trust in him as well. And yeah, and it was all right as well. Like, this was the time, the circumstances were all right, and now, like, Moses' life and his calling was about to be fulfilled now as well. So after all that Moses has been through recently, like just last week he was talking to a burning bush, and like this week he's got like a rod that's a serpent, he's got a hand that's withered, he still has his speech impediment, that's okay. But regardless, it's just showing that God is using anything and everything in you for his glory and to serve your purpose and in your life for him as well. And even someone like that we see as great as Moses, he still had his weaknesses. He had no confidence in himself. And I'm going to like reiterate that point again. Like a lot of us can struggle with self-confidence, and he even still had his anxieties, even after God reassured him that I will be with you and I will deliver you and your people. He still had his worries. And now we have the New Testament as well. Like, how many promises does God give us? Like, do not fear, do not be anxious. Like, I will be with you. Even sent his son, his firstborn, like we just kind of read, that exchange of the firstborn son of Israel. God gave him to us for us. And if like, I don't know if that's not enough, but God still works. Like, even after all that, God still works for us. And he wants to as well. So that's essentially chapter 4. That's the crux of it. Do you guys have any questions? Amazing. Thanks, guys. I hope you guys learned something from that. Yeah, glory be to God for Abraam.
All right, guys, once again, welcome back to another